All right. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lexi Gerbil. I'm the manager of education at the Indiana Historical Society, as well as the state coordinator of National History Day in Indiana. What we're going to do today is take some time to go over prepping for the state contest, information on what judges should know. If you've judged with us previously, you'll see some information that you've seen before, and I've tried to mix it up a little bit and provide some new reminders and new information that is specific to the state contest as well. So we want to start by thanking you so much for your support. This is not possible without you and your support. So we want to thank you for not only taking the time this evening, but also taking your time on that Saturday, April 18th, to help support the students and support National History Day in Indiana. So today's agenda, the way I've set this up today is I'm going to go through your day as a judge in the best way that I can. So we're going to start at the beginning and we'll talk about your role. We'll talk about the structure of the day. We'll talk about the schedule. We'll talk about the interview portion of your day. We'll then go over the annual theme and contest rulebook. And then we'll discuss evaluating entries, ranking them. The difference from a regional to a state is that the state contest, we have finals judging, and we'll discuss that. And then I'm going to go over some reminders that are specific to each project type. And then we'll wrap up with our contact information. So that way you know how to reach us or contact us if you need to prior to contest day. So let's start with your role as a judge. Your mission for state contest day, for any NHD contest, is to foster a love of history. These students have been working on these projects now for months, right? They have been building their projects, working on their research, working to improve based on what they learned at regionals. And so we want to foster that love and that interest and continue that. We want to respect every student. We want to offer constructive feedback for all students. We want to give every project equal consideration in a judging group, and we want to create happy memories. We want students to walk away from this contest with positive memories and being proud of the work that they did. We have resources for you as a judge that hopefully can help prepare not only with this webinar, but in addition to this webinar, can help prepare you for contest day. So we have a Google Drive, and you should have received that link via email from Claire. We'll also be sending it out again in preparation for the contest. But you're going to get in that resource drive, which is a Google Drive, you're going to find things like the theme book for the year. You're going to find the contest rule book. You're going to find our judging guide, which we've made. You're going to find online feedback, written instructions on how to use the online system. Project category instructions. You're going to find judge feedback examples. You're going to find a FAQ document. You're going to find a bunch of stuff. And hopefully all of it is there to help support you as a judge on contest day. So let's go ahead and talk about overall contest structure and the schedule. If you've judged for us before, then it's going to function very similarly for the first part of the day. You're going to be in teams of 2 or 3, hopefully 3, fingers crossed. We want 3 in every group. You're going to attend morning orientation where we go over the day. You'll then move into student interviews. You will then come back to the judging lounge to discuss your evaluations and rankings. And then you will submit your rankings to us. That lets us know who's moving on to the next round of judging. You'll then complete electronic evaluation forms. This is just a reminder for everybody that we have transitioned to the online evaluation system, so you do need to bring your device that day so you can complete the online evaluations. This is a little bit different from a regional. We have a finals round. So some of you today here might be judging the first round, you might be judging finals round, or you might have signed up to judge both. Every judge there's a different situation for every judge. So depending on what you've signed up to do, that will determine your assignment for the day. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Finals round happens, and then finals round judges complete finals in ranking and evaluations. So this is the structure of the day. The most important thing to remember for the state contest is this is the end for a lot of students and for the National History Day Indiana state season. So your rankings will determine which projects are eligible to compete at the national competition this June in College Park, Maryland. We send representatives from Indiana to that contest. And so the top ranking projects at this contest are the ones who go and have the chance to go. Students have been working towards this all year. So it's really important to keep in mind, to have that in the back of your head, to remember that we want to try to create a positive experience for them and also find the strongest projects based on the evaluation and the rubric. So let's just talk over the process for evaluating projects. Website and paper function pretty similarly. Pre-contest, you're going to be provided a login. You might have received that login information. You might be receiving that login information, but you're going to log into the judging site to view your entries. You're going to use the username and password that Claire will provide to you by email. Then you can start to view the projects. With paper and website, they have to submit that to us early. They're in the process of doing that right now as I'm speaking. So we're going to set that up for you, and then you're going to view the projects, start filling out the evaluations, and keep notes before contest day. You're going to have space and places to take notes within the registration, within the judging system. You can then start writing comments for each entry. You're going to see the whole project for paper and website. Websites will be done, papers will be done. You're going to be able to start that whole evaluation process. At the contest, you'll then come and interview students, and as needed, you'll finalize those rankings and those evaluations. You're going to deliberate with your team to discuss the projects using that rubric and make sure that you're all on the same page and that you all align, and then submit your rankings to us. So this is the day for website and paper. So for website and paper, evaluation might happen a little bit before actual contest day. Exhibit, performance, and documentary, on the other hand, projects are not due fully until contest day. So this day looks a little bit different. You're going to still log into the contest site because you're going to have access to their process papers and annotated bibliographies. So you'll get to see their paperwork, but you won't have the full project yet. You're going to use that username and password that was created for you to sign in. You want to keep notes, kind of get that process started for yourself. Start thinking about the projects, look at that process paper, look at the annotated bibliography, and then at the contest, you'll be able to view the projects and interview the students. Keep those notes on plain paper. You want to deliberate with your team. You'll evaluate the projects against the rubric and discuss those strengths and areas of improvement. You'll submit the rankings, and then you'll complete those evaluation forms. So your day is just going to look a little bit different because you'll be viewing that project on contest day. Accessing project materials. Project materials will be available in ZFairs, which is our judging and registration system. Papers and websites will also be sent out. We'll send you the information, all of this via email, so you know how to access everything. Claire will contact you when materials are ready. I have created an overview video that's also in that judge resource folder that I mentioned at the beginning. This is available so it walks you through the process basically. I basically go through the process of logging in, finding your judging portal, finding all of that kind of stuff, how to judge, how to submit those things. So if you are new to the system and you haven't used it at a previous contest, I might recommend watching that video just so you can see what the whole process looks like. This is just a screenshot of what it will look like for you within that judging system. There's going to be more information, obviously, because it's going to have a bunch of project information that's not available in this screenshot here. But if you look, you'll see it'll list your judges that you're judging with. So it'll list your name there, and then it'll list your judging assignments. So it'll tell you what judging group you're in, it'll tell you what you're judging, and then it'll list the projects. And then there'll be a button there that says view and evaluate. and that's where you fill out the evaluations. Sometimes it's less likely at state, but there are a couple instances where it is going to happen. Some of you might see multiple tabs within your judging portal. This is just because you're judging different divisions and categories together because we don't have enough of a project, enough projects, for example, to make a full judging group. So you just want to make sure to look at every tab that shows up on your judging site for you. When you judge, it's very important that you make sure to check in with Claire on contest day to make sure she sees everything. If you finish your evaluations, we want to make sure she sees those completed evaluations as well. We'll talk about that, what that checkout process looks like in a little bit. But that's the beginning, right? That's the contest structure. That's how the day goes. So we're gonna start with that morning orientation where you'll get yourself settled. We'll go over the flow of the day. We are at Marian University, so we'll talk about where everyone is going. Everybody will be moving to different spaces across campus. So we'll discuss all of that, and then we start the student interview process. So if you've never judged with us before, we'll talk about the rule book and the evaluation process in a minute. But as a reminder, interviews are an interview is an opportunity for you to learn more about the student and the project that they created. This interview technically does not affect rank, and there's nowhere on the rubric that has a section about the student interview. So there's no evaluation criteria specific to the interview. But interviews matter because it gives students a time to show the work that they did, practice public speaking skills, and for you to learn a little bit more about the process that student went through for their project. I think it's also an opportunity to clarify any maybe questions that you have based on what you've been able to look at. So it is not an interrogation. I like to think of it as a conversation. It's the student's time to shine. Students will be nervous. You're going to see a range of students. Positive body language, we want to smile, we want to make them feel comfortable, and we don't want them to, focus on the nervousness that they have. Remember that it's mainly their time, right? You're going to ask them questions, but we want them to talk about their projects. We want to use that time for them to showcase their knowledge and their work. So, I like to begin with easy questions to build confidence. We're going to give you a half sheet of questions in your judging packet on the day, so you can base your questions off those questions. But begin with easy questions to build confidence. Why did you choose your topic? How do you think it connects to the theme? Why did you choose this particular category? You can then move into more challenging questions. Things like, how did you go about your research? Or how did you find your sources? Talk a little bit about your thesis. And then it's nice to end by giving the students an opportunity to share anything you might have missed. This is only a 15 to 20 minute time slot, so they might have something in their head that they're really passionate about and that they really wanted to talk about. I think it's a great way to end by giving them the opportunity to mention anything that hasn't been discussed already. You're going to talk to, depending on your assignment, you might talk to students who did a project by themselves, or you might be assigned to talk to students who did a project in a group. For group projects, particularly at state, you might notice that only one student shows up or two students shows up. That's okay. Not all group members need to be present for the interview for the students to still be able to compete. So just remember that. Don't take that into consideration at all when evaluating. You just might see, one student couldn't make it down for that day. So for group projects, there may be a group member missing. That's okay. Talk to the students that are there. Just as a reminder for interviews, no personal questions, no asking about school, age, things like that. We ask that you don't take any photos of any students during contest. And then you take the students' lead on things like a handshake. Just for student privacy, we want to focus on the project for the day. A couple other things to remember is we want this to be a positive experience for them. So don't tell them their rank. Don't give them any verbal critiques during the interview. Don't talk about other projects or rankings of the projects that you're looking at with students or near students. We want them to leave feeling like, "Oh, I got to really talk about what I was passionate about. I really got to show the work that I did." So we want to make sure that that's the experience that they have. You are going to give them the feedback in written form, and they will figure out and they will find out their placement later on. So leave that for another time. As a reminder, depending on your assigned division and category, there's a difference in who's allowed during judging to be in the room. So for exhibits, it's a big exhibit hall. There's a lot of judging that's happening all at the same time in the same space. Because of that, it's just students in the exhibit hall. So just judges and students in the exhibit hall. So that way it doesn't get too crowded. Papers, it is also just students, because it's just a conversation about your paper. Websites, performances, and documentaries are open to the public though. So family members or other supportive students can come in and watch as the documentary is played or as the performance is performed. But you are still in charge of that space as the judges. So people should only be moving in and out of the room in between projects, so not to disrupt judging. Okay, so we've gone through the first part of the day, the structure, you've done your interviews. Let's talk a little bit now about, you've looked at the projects, how do we evaluate and rank, and put that all together. So before we do that, I want to talk about the annual theme and contest rulebook, because this is the kind of thing that guides the whole entire day. All projects that are presenting at this state contest on April 18th have a focus on the theme of revolution, reaction, reform, and history. All projects need to have a connection to the theme. So students have been working on projects, and you'll see a variety of topics and a variety of viewpoints and analysis and research, but they all should come back to the theme revolution, reaction, reform, and history. Top ranking projects at the state contest should have a clear connection to that theme. I'll mention that theme in a little bit because it is a part of the rubric, so when I talk about the rubric, I'll mention that again. The contest rulebook is what students use to craft their project. Their project is crafted using rules from this contest rulebook. We ask that you take a glance through that rulebook and the project type instructions that are in the resource folder that I mentioned at the beginning, because it really can help you better see why the projects are made the way that they are. Top ranking projects should follow the rulebook and category instructions. So we're looking for projects that follow rules, have a strong connection to the theme. So let's talk a little bit about how you evaluate those. There are 3 parts to every National History Day project. The first part is the process paper. So this is something that everyone's going to have access to prior to contest. It is a 500-word description of the research process. It's required for all categories. It should not include images, quotes, or anything like that. It's focused on the students and their student voice. So they should tell us, how did you choose your topic? How does it relate to the theme? How did you conduct research? How did you create your project? What's your historical argument? This is the focus of the process paper. We should see the student's voice in there. The next thing is the annotated bibliography. So this is a list of all the sources the students consulted in their research and in their project. It should be separated into primary and secondary sources, and annotations must be no more than 2 to 3 sentences and answer 2 questions. How did you use the source? How did this source help you understand the topic? So when looking at a project, you're not only looking at the project itself, but the accompanying paperwork that goes with it. So students, top-ranking projects should also have a good process paper and a strong annotated bibliography with strong use of primary and secondary sources. Then you view the project itself. So we have different divisions and categories depending on what you requested in when you signed up. We tried our best to accommodate that, but if you've judged with us before, at the state contest, you can't judge what you've already judged, so we have to do our best to put people where we are able. So we have a youth, junior, and senior division. We have individual and group projects, and then we have 5 different categories: documentary, exhibit, paper, performance, and website. All projects are evaluated using rules and criteria and using rubrics like the ones you'll see on the screen here. So this is an example of an exhibit rubric, but all projects will look similar. All rubrics will look similar to this one. They'll just be a little bit different depending on their category. So we're going to go through just a reminder of what's on those rubrics today, and what you should consider as you're evaluating projects. So, criteria. If you have judged before, you know that 80% of the decision that you make, or you've heard me say, that 80% of the decision that you make should be based on the historical quality. And as a reminder, what I'm talking about with historical quality is I'm talking about the research and the work that they put in to the text. So things like historical argument, theme, connection, wide research. I'm going to go over these a little bit more in depth in just a moment. But we're also looking for 20% of that to be clarity of presentation. So that's the actual structure of the project itself. That is very category specific. So depending on the category you get, that will change depending. So if you think about it, an exhibit, the clarity of presentation is going to be different than a website because a website's on a computer, an exhibit is built. They're going to have different things that they're going to be evaluating. So when you're evaluating a project, you need to take both historical quality and clarity of presentation into consideration, remembering that it's an 80-20 split. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through the key definitions or terms that are on the evaluation forms that I think it's really important for a judge to remember and to keep in mind. So starting off with historical argument, as a reminder, that's the central point of the project. So you might hear thesis, or you might hear argument, you might hear claim. These are different words that people use to describe kind of the same thing. It shouldn't be a statement of fact. It's a development of, and it's an argument that is being made using research to support. It does not need to be like labeled within the project. So for example, on an exhibit board or in a documentary, they don't need to say the thesis is, but it should be very clear what the thesis is. And then you agree as a team what the argument is for each project. So you want to make sure as a team you're all on the same page when looking at a project. What is the argument they've made? Do they support that argument? Then you're going to see that you need to evaluate it based on its connection to the theme. There should be a clear connection to the theme and make sure it's present. There should be a strong use of evidence to support that clear connection to the theme. This year in particular, with Revolution, Reaction, Reform, and History, it's important to remember that the project does not need to address all 3 parts of this theme this year. What that means is, like, for example, if the project is focused on revolution and reaction, you shouldn't rank it lower because it didn't talk about reform. But we want to make sure that projects that address all 3 then have a strong argument for that connection. So it's just something to keep in mind. We're looking for the clearest connection to the theme overall. Wide research refers to a variety of types of sources available: books, articles, credible websites, diaries, photographs. We want a wide variety, different types of resources pulled together to support the research. We also want primary sources, eyewitness accounts, letters, speeches, diaries, images, artifacts, newspaper articles, things like that. Students need to have wide research and a good amount of primary. So I always say it's more about quality than quantity. In particular, even if a student has a bunch of pages and pages of research or pages and pages of sources, are they all the same type of source? What are they using different types of sources? Do they have a variety of primary sources? That's what we're looking for. Historical context, it's the larger setting in which a topic took place. It may include relevant economic, social, intellectual, religious, cultural, or political conditions of a time and place. It could be a variety of things because we have a variety of topics that get covered in National History Day projects. But we want students to have looked at the larger setting. So taking into consideration the time period that something happened in, the culture at the time, those types of things. Multiple perspectives is the idea that students consider the multiple points of view that could be present within their topic. So it could be, one point of view, one person's experience or a side of the story. Multiple are present when a topic is explored from more than one point of view or experience. So we want students to have thought about the different multiple perspectives that could be present. That means they might present a variety of perspectives, and you take that into consideration. Historical accuracy, we want accurate, credible, without critical omissions. This is just making sure that the information is correct. Significance in history, we're thinking about the impact or the consequence of the topic, so both short-term and long-term. Really here, you're looking for the so what. How did this topic change history, or how did it have an impact on history? Global, we also want to look at scale. So did this have a global impact, a local impact? Both are great, either are great. Success of a project does not depend on the scale of the impact, but rather did they address the scale itself. And the last thing I want to talk about here is student voice. I think this is very important because sometimes I think when you look at the rubric, you might think student voice equals the interview. That is not the case. Most of the time, we are asking you to evaluate the project as the project itself without considering the interview. So student voice actually refers to the ideas and the analysis of the student. So is their argument clear in their project? And is there a balance between the student's words and the sources that they used? So do we see a clear balance? Do we know what the student says versus what the sources say? So, for example, like how might a student's voice be lost? For example, in a documentary, it might be long video clips where they don't talk. In paper, it might be long block quotes, so it takes up time for them to provide analysis. Performance, it might be that they have like a narrator or a professor character reading from a primary or secondary source that takes away time from their own analysis and their own words. Exhibit and website, it could be overuse of quoted materials from primary and secondary sources without any analysis. So you look at the board and it's difficult, for example, in exhibit, it's difficult for you to find the words of the student and you just see more quotes than anything else. So these are examples of how a student's voice might be lost. When on contest day, you'll discuss as a group and you'll think about, do I see a good balance between the student's words and in the research that they did? As a reminder, Students of National History Day can choose any topic. They are not, we do not provide any parameters of what topics they can explore. So it could be any subject area, world, national, local history. It could be, they could be looking at short-term and long-term effects. They could be looking at something that maybe is only 40 years old, or they could be looking at something that is 300 years old. They just need to, it just needs to be old enough to yield historical perspective. Our guideline is about 20 years, that it should be at least 20 years old. But it should be a historical topic, and that's important to keep in mind too. It lends itself to evidence-based arguments. Let the student convince you based on their analysis and their research that they have developed a good argument. But they should have good evidence-based arguments. It also should hold their interest, right? And should hold, they should have created something really interesting based on that. This is where I just remind people, beware of your favorite history bias. We all have a topic like in our heart of hearts that we love, right? That we love exploring, that we find interest in. But remember, when you are ranking and evaluating projects, you are focused on what the student did and the research that they've presented. So just beware of that when you are ranking and evaluating. Just make sure a project doesn't rank higher because the project is a really cool topic. So I want to talk briefly here about what the rubric looks like. Mainly this idea that they're going to see descriptors, and this is going to help you decide where to rank, where to evaluate the project on the rubric. You'll see here it goes from exemplary, proficient, developing, novice to not evident. When possible, we've tried to use a consistent response scale, so you'll see similar language across the rubric. You want to select the descriptor that is most true based on the project you are viewing. And we evaluate projects on their own. We do not evaluate comparing. Well, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but there's a difference between ranking the projects and evaluating the projects. When you're evaluating, when you're filling out that rubric, after you've come back from your student interviews, you are thinking about the project itself on its own. Does it consistently and clearly connect to the topic? Or does the annual theme is mostly clear and connected to the topic? You're going to be looking at that project on its own. In addition to the rubric part of the evaluation criteria, there's also rules. Rules help you compare projects. There are two types of NHD rules. They're general for all categories, and then there's some that are category specific. NHD is a contest with rules, not about rules, so we want to use those to help us make decisions, but they are the way that we evaluate the project, and students should be following the rules. So you'll see exhibits rules are going to look a little different than websites rules, for example. Despite rules, there are some times where rules are not exactly followed always, and so we want to make sure you know how to evaluate and to address those. So if there are any rule infractions that you come across on the 18th, we have to define the difference between a minor infraction, a major infraction, and something that is disqualification. Minor infractions are things that don't give a competitive advantage. These are your most common. These are things like they accidentally forgot something on their home page or their title page. They went over 2 words on their word count. These are things that can advance. These are things that can be fixed. Didn't give a major competitive advantage. You want to note that in your comment though, because that's a big deal at nationals and could determine ranking at a national level. It also determines ranking here because it can be used as a way to decide between 2 projects when you're ranking them. Major infractions, though, are things that give a competitive advantage. Exceeding time or word limit excessively, providing additional information. This is when you let us know and we tell you what to do. The same goes for disqualification. Things like plagiarism or tampering with another person's entry or things like that, you tell us, we tell you what to do. So if it's minor, you can always check in with us, let us know. We'll, give you some guidance. Major infractions, always check in with us. Let us know and then we will give you further guidance. This is a resource that is available in the Judge Resource folder, but if you end up being assigned to website, this is something that can be helpful for counting words on a website. This is especially important at the state contest, just because we want to make sure projects we're sending to the national contest are within the word count that they are supposed to be. So if you get assigned a website, I would recommend looking at this document to help remind you about word count. And last thing I want to mention in terms of evaluation is, sometimes I get questions about AI and the use with NHD projects. There are ways that AI can be used when students are building National History Day projects, and there are ways it can't be used. In general, we have students have been working on these with their teachers, and their teachers help support them with this. So we believe what the students say during interview. Most of the time, we're assuming students have done this research and have built this themselves. So, if it comes up in an interview or someone mentions it in their process paper, you can ask them about it. But most of the time, this is just here in case something you might have a question or might alert, and then you just ask us about it. But students can use it for brainstorming or for looking up information. It just can't be used to create elements of the project. So just as a reminder, you don't have to ask about it. It's not something that needs to be discussed in an interview or anything like that. But this is just a reminder to believe what students say for the interview. If it comes up and then you have a question about it, you can ask me. You can ask me, or you can ask Claire. Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. Claire, is my sound okay? Okay. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. We're gonna talk now about ranking and giving feedback. So you've interviewed students, you've now talked through the evaluation, and you've thought about how that student should be evaluated. We now need you to rank, and then we need you to give us the written comments. So I just spent a lot of time talking about evaluation. Now I'm going to talk about ranking. The difference here is evaluating is you looking at that rubric and deciding how that project did according to that rubric. Ranking is then you looking at the projects together and saying, what are our top performing projects according to our evaluations? So, top entries generally have higher check marks because they are generally more successful in meeting the criteria of the rubric. So when you're looking to rank, you can look at your evaluations and say, what are our top evaluated projects who's meeting the criteria of the rubric itself? If the entries you think are the top ones do not have the highest check marks, then you should be going back and double checking your evaluations. Why don't those things match up? And you're going to encounter a variety of different project groupings, right? You might have two projects that you feel are like evaluated very similarly. They have similar check marks. So then ranking is used to determine how they fall within the group, and this is the opportunity for you to tell us who are your top performing projects. So the way that works is you will submit a ranking sheet to Claire. You will also submit the ranking sheet virtually as well, and that tells us who is eligible to move on to finals and also who's eligible to continue being considered for the national contest. Once that ranking is submitted, you then write us your comments. We ask that the ranking come first because we need to prep for the finals round. And I can't tell students who's moving on unless I have ranking. So written comments can be written after I have that ranking, right? And they can be, you get, sorry, you can have time to evaluate and take your evaluation and put it into comment form. But ranking needs to come first so we can keep the contest moving. So written comments, again, remember 80% about historical quality, 20% about clarity of presentation. Your comments should match that or should match to kind of match that breakdown. In the online form, there's one box and it's going to have you for written comments that you use for written comments, and it's going to have a 500 character minimum. Now, what that means is that it won't submit the evaluation unless you meet that 500 characters. Now, I know that might seem like a lot, but it's 500 characters, so that means letters, spaces, periods, those type of things. It's not 500 words. So it's really about a paragraph. We are hoping that you'll have enough to say that it'll be very easy to meet that 500 and go over it. We want to aim, like 1,000 is a good number of characters, 1,000 to 2,000. Over 3,000, the text on the PDF that we send students of your comments can be too small to read. But, we want to aim for enough comments that students feel like they have a good idea of your evaluation. We want you to please write in second person. So it was so great meeting you, your project is, that kind of stuff. The main importance of writing comments is that the students are going to read them. We're going to give them a copy of the evaluation that you filled out. So we want them to understand why you rated them the way that you did. We want them to feel like they left with a better understanding of your evaluation overall. So the written comments help support your decisions. I always recommend judges focus on providing details so like if you marked them down on primary sources, just as an example, comments should reference primary sources and tell them what they were missing. It also then provides them things to think about for their future projects. And it also is an opportunity to show appreciation. They want to know that they were seen and that their project was seen, and that you show appreciation for the work that they did. The most common way to set up comments, and I think it's the easiest way, is to create yourself a comment sandwich. So start positive, say something positive about the project, have your constructive feedback, and then end positive. It's a really great way because then the students aren't immediately starting with things that they did bad, and then they're not ending that way, and they can think about the positive things they also did within their project. So we try to avoid vagueness, and we try to avoid comments that don't have enough information for students to take action. We also want to avoid check boxes that don't align with the comments. So for example, theme connection is checked as novice, but then the comments praise the theme connection. We want them to match up. We ask that you don't indicate ranking. Again, because we might have multiple judging groups, or we might have, at state contests, there's a variety of things that happen. We don't want students to get to look back at that evaluation later and then be confused by the ranking information that's on that. So don't mention ranking at all. Just be mindful, you're writing to young learners most of the time, because we have students across the state participating, and they're all coming from across the state to participate in this contest on the 18th. This is the first time they might have done a project of this size. So this is the first time they might have created an annotated bibliography, or the first time that they might have written a process paper, or that they've built an exhibit. Just be mindful that you're talking to somebody who did something for the first time, and we want to encourage them to continue to try to do these things. So I have a couple of examples here. I know it's a little bit small text, but I'm going to read one as just an example. of what we're looking for in our comments. So this is so saying something like adding some information about what events preceded your topic and how your topic influenced events afterwards would have strengthened your exhibit. Right there, that's something the student can do, right? They know, oh, I didn't really talk about things that happened before or after. That's something I could add. You've included so much important information, but it's unclear how these events came to be or their impact on history. These are things that students can consider and take an actionable item and do. They can apply. So criticism should be phrased constructively. That was helpful, but it wasn't wasn't negative. Specific criticism is backed up with examples. Again, please provide feedback that connects to each part of the rubric, especially if you marked lower on the rubric in particular sections. That's what we want to focus on so the students understand why they received those lower marks. And then end on a positive note. Once you have completed evaluations, submitted your ranking, and written your comments, you then turn all that in on the online system, and then you check in with Claire. And Claire will go on her side of the evaluation system, and then she'll double check that she sees all of them and it says finished and submitted. And that's how we know you're good to go. Since we've transitioned to the online system, checking in with Claire is the way that we ensure that we get all the evaluations so all the students receive their feedback. And we just make sure we don't lose anything because it wasn't saved or it wasn't properly, submitted. We always want to make sure that we can see it on Claire's end too, because there is that save aspect that we want to make sure that happens. So that's the process. Now, what I'm talking about here is kind of the general preliminary round. I want to talk about finals judging now. So if you are a finals judge, or if you have, if you signed up to judge finals, or you've signed up to judge both, I'm going to transition to talk about finals because finals does work a little bit differently than the first round. So you'll see I have an example of what the finals round document looks like. It looks a little different. There's no big rubric. So finals judging, you are going to use the same criteria and rules as preliminary judging. So you're still going to look at historical quality, clarity of presentation. You're still going to look at rules compliance, but you're not filling out the same form. You'll receive information about your assignment before contest, but we don't have project information to share with you because we won't know who's in finals until contest day. We use the first round on contest day to determine for us who is going to move on to the finals round. And the finals round determines who's going to make it to the national contest. So we ask that you meet at Judge HQ around 12:45. Orientation usually starts at about 1. And then that you're going to have a short orientation that is specific to finals. And then you will then go view finals round projects. If you've ever judged preliminary judging, it's going to be very different because finals round doesn't include student interviews. All finals round judging is closed to the public except documentaries. So documentary students come back to play their documentary for you, but you don't interview them. It is just playing the documentary. So just to kind of go over what that looks like, if you judge exhibits in finals, you go to the exhibit hall and you look at the projects on their own. You just look at the project and you evaluate the project. Because as a reminder, interviews do not count towards evaluation. So, or are not a part of evaluation. So you're just looking at the exhibit. Website, you're going to stay in the judges lounge and we're going to pull up the websites for you and you're going to look at the websites. Papers, same thing. You're going to stay in the judges lounge. We're going to give you the papers and you're going to evaluate the papers there. Documentary, you are then going to go to a judging space. Students will come in and play the documentaries for you and then you'll evaluate them from there. This year, unfortunately, we do not have any performance finals, so we won't have anybody who will be doing performances during the finals round. Finals feedback, unlike just differently from the preliminary round, is all comments. So instead of filling out a rubric, you are writing comments for students. So you won't be using the same rubric. You want to focus on giving students feedback on what they're doing well and what they can work on, what they can improve upon, and what they can take away to help them. In the finals round, those top 2 projects that you determine are the top 2, those are the ones that are going to be eligible to move on to the national contest. So we want you to really think about what 2 projects best meet the evaluation criteria and the rules compliance for National History Day. Comments should leave students understanding how they did in the final round. And so all judges in the final round will have the chance to fill this out. Just as a heads up, the online system for that is a little different. It doesn't really function in the same way. So most people will be writing comments in the final round. So that's finals. And then the last thing that I want to talk about here before we're just going to wrap up is I just have some project type reminders. Everybody chose or was able to choose a preference of what they'd like to judge. Again, at state, we do the best we can to assign you to something that you have requested, but if you judge something before, you can't judge it again. So we have to move some people around depending on that. So that's why I think it's important to go over some reminders for all the categories, because you might end up in a category that's different than you judged maybe at regionals. So as a reminder, performances are 10 minutes. You set up and tear the students should set up and tear them down within 5 minutes. They should have appropriate costumes and set. It's a 20-minute judging slot. So you think about it as 5 minutes to set up, 10 minutes for the performance, 5 minutes for questions and tear down. Usually students don't take 5 minutes to set up, so you'll have some time within there to make sure you can ask questions at the end. Remember that they're open to the public. Performances should make their thesis clear, but it doesn't need to be specifically like called out, for example. It's not like they need to say, the thesis is, but you should be looking for it. It should be very clear. And then remember with performance that historical quality and research need to be present in the performance. Acting and the performance itself is important. Students should have a good performance, but think about, what did they use their time to tell you? Did they build a strong research? Did they show strong research and show strong historical quality within the project? And what did they spend their time, their 10 minutes telling you? Documentaries, 10 minutes maximum as well. They're going to have a credits list at the end, but you'll look at the full annotated bibliography to see all of their sources. This is also a 20-minute judging slot, again, to give them time to set up and to close down their documentary. It's not timed like performance, though, where they have like 5 minutes. Technology is technology, so we do the best we can, and we try to be flexible. Documentaries are open to the public. Documentaries, again, should also have a good balance between student voice and other interviews and video clips. I think it's important to remember we want to hear the student voice, and we want what they say to be backed up with research. Papers are 1,500 to 2,500 words. If they have an appendix, some of them do, some of them do not. Just remember that an appendix should only include items such as maps, pictures, graphs. Shouldn't be having extra information in the appendix. Students are allowed to either do MLA or Chicago style, and they can use different formats. So they can use footnotes, they can use in-text citations. It just matters that it's consistent, that it's correct and it's consistent. If you have questions about that, you can always let us know, but they can use either format. So different projects might look different because one has used MLA, one has used Chicago, for example. So just keep that in mind. 15-minute judging slots for you to just talk with the students. It's usually, with paper, it's a conversation, so think about it that way. And then it's closed judging, so it is just the judges talking with the student. And again, keeping aware of that balance between the evidence they use and their voice. It's their paper. You should hear their voice in it. Websites, it is a 1,200 word limit. You want to credit all the materials. They want to credit all the materials in the website, full citation in the bibliography. So maybe check out that annotated bibliography for that full information. Again, 15-minute judging slot. You'll want to remind them that you've looked at this before, so they don't have to, they shouldn't present their website to you. It should be a conversation. You want to be able to, they are going to want to pull it up, and I think it's helpful to pull it up so they might reference it, but they don't have to present it, and they shouldn't present it to you. Ask us if you have questions about word count. Look at that document that I mentioned. And this is just a reminder, there should be no outside links within the website to other information. This is something that's in the rule book, but it's just a reminder. So like, you shouldn't click on a link and it take you to another website that has a bunch of information. That shouldn't happen within a website. They are allowed to obviously provide sources and credit those sources to other places, but you shouldn't be going to other websites. And then exhibits. 500 student composed words. Remember, that's a short amount of words, but it does not include the primary sources, the citation, the quotations. So make sure to pay attention to the difference. And if you have questions about word count, we will have somebody at the exhibit hall who can answer those questions. There should be credits for all materials in this exhibit. Pictures should be credited, all that kind of stuff, but then full citations in the bibliography. That is also a 15-minute judging slot, and it is closed judging. This is something to remember with exhibits, is that sometimes we have students who are coming for specifically for the state contest. We have students who are coming from across the, they're coming from like across the state, and they've traveled 3 hours with the time change. So they might arrive and set up a few minutes ahead of their judging time. So you might not be able to fully view the exhibit until judging time occurs. If that happens, we don't open the exhibit hall until all judges have cleared out after judging occurs. So we give you until about noon to stay in that space if you would like to look at the exhibits. So you will have time after judging to review exhibits. Please use that time. The judging hall, the exhibit hall, and where the judges' lounges are two separate areas. So we ask that you make sure that you feel like you've looked, that you've had the opportunity to look at all the exhibits, fully examine them before you return to the judges' lounge. And you'll have time to do that after interviews. And interviews really should focus on students telling you about it, and then you can go through and evaluate it. Here's again everything that's in the judge resource folder. Claire will again send that out when she sends out judging assignments. But remember this is where you're going to find a lot of judging information. And so we have come to the end of our judging webinar. I know there was a lot of information, but we thank you for staying with us. So our contact information, if you have questions about general judging questions, especially about accessing your account or other things like that, you're going to reach out to Claire. And then there's my contact information as well. During contests, I'm managing the student and teacher aspects of the contest. But during judging, I'm the one who's also running around to help, with any questions or anything. So that is also our phone number for contest day. That phone number will not be monitored until the 18th, but in case you want to write it down so you have it for contest day, I will also show it on contest day during our morning orientation, but just so you're aware. So it is Wednesday. We are currently in the process of finalizing judge assignments and putting together the judging schedule. So we will be reaching out at the end of the week with more information in your judge assignments.